Hey folks, to migrate a graph indexing project called a subgraph to a subquery project, the process is actually quite easy. This is due to the similarities in the project structure. So let's take a quick look at how we can migrate the Gravatar project. Jumping into VS Code here, we've got the Gravatar project from the graph where you can see we've got two entities in the schema file. We've got the manifest file here, and then we've got the mapping file as well. So what we'll do first is let's create a starter project. We'll go ahead and choose the Ethereum network family. We'll choose the Ethereum starter project, and then we'll go ahead and accept the various defaults. I'll also go and install the dependencies. And while this is installing, let's take a look at the schema file here. The default has two entities, transactions and approvals. We won't need these, so let's go ahead and copy from the graph entity, and we'll call this Gravatar. We'll delete the parameter here, and we'll also delete the ID, and we'll remove the bytes and change this to of type ID. SubQuery doesn't have a type bytes, so we need to change these across to strings, like so. Let's save this, and then we'll jump into our manifest file. And it's here where you'll be able to see the largest set of differences. At the top here, we've got the spec version, and then below that, we've got the location of the schema file. This is just slightly lower in the SubQuery manifest file. And then after that, for the graph, everything is contained within the data sources section. SubQuery has a network section here where you can see the chain ID is specified, the endpoint, and also the dictionary as well. Now the dictionary helps increase the indexing performance. And for the endpoint, the reason why the graph doesn't specify one is because the graph runs in a decentralized fashion. So the node is already designed for the Ethereum network, and when it's brought online, it starts searching for other peers in the network to serve as endpoints, and this is an architectural difference. In both SubQuery and SubGraph, you import custom ABI specifications that is used by the processor to parse the arguments. For subgraphs, this is done within the mapping section under the ABIS key, and for SubQuery, this is in the options section here, where a key is used here to map to an asset down here, which then points to the ABI file. The start block here maps across to start block, so let's copy this over. I'll also copy across the contract address. And for the ABI file, what I do need to do is create a folder called ABIS, and then identify the ABI file itself. So let me create this folder first of all, and I've already downloaded the ABI file, so I'll just drag this in, and then moving lower we'll get into the handler section, because these are defined differently. Now instead of listing the blocks, the events and the calls as a key, as you can see here, and then stating the handler that processes it down below, what SubQuery does is you define the handler as the key, as you can see here, and then what follows is a description of how the handler is triggered. SubQuery also supports advanced filtering in the handler itself. The format of the supported filters varies depending on the block, event, call that is being used, and also between different blockchain networks. And you can find more information in our documentation here, where you can see there are 7 supported filters, depending on the handler and also depending, as mentioned, on the blockchain network. One final note, in SubQuery, we don't list out all the entities inside the project manifest file. So what I'll do is I'm going to copy the handler name, new Gravatar, and paste this in the handler name here. And in fact, I'm going to remove the transaction handler because we don't need this. All the data that we want can be obtained from the log. I'll copy the event name here and replace it with our topics and clean this up like so. We'll start with this and we'll add the updated gravatar later on. The final file to look at is the mapping file. So let's go and open this up. And you'll be able to see that they are quite similar, both importing the auto-generated types, albeit from different file locations. Let me go ahead and run yarn code gen first, just to auto-generate the types. And you'll find that the approval and transaction types here are no longer needed because we've got our new gravatar object. Let's copy this, paste it in here, and I'll call this gravatar, just to get rid of some of the errors here. And because I ran code gen in the types folder, you'll see we've got API interfaces and there's a gravity TypeScript here that we need to reference. So let's update this with gravity. And then within this file, you'll see we've got something called new gravatar log. So we want to copy this in here and have our log of type new gravatar log. Let me delete the second function here, just for this example first of all. And I'll go ahead and update the mappings here, just to remove the errors. There we have it. Let's just double check. We've got the function name here. Let's go and copy the handle new gravatar name, replace it like so. And again, let's do yarn code gen, and we'll build the code as well, just to double check for any errors. Looking good. Let's now go and run our Docker environment by going yarn start Docker, or if you're a fan of shortcuts, we can run yarn dev, which actually just runs code gen, build, and start Docker all in one go. Now what's going to happen is once this loads up, it will error due to the endpoint. So what I'll have to do is in my YAML file, I'll jump into the onFinality website and I'll grab a free API key, and then we'll run this again. Okay, so I've got the API key now. Let's go ahead and start everything up and running. And while this is loading, we'll jump into the playground here at localhost 3000. And you can see it's fetching blocks. Let's refresh the playground here and we can run the gravatar. And you can see we've got data coming back. So if I follow the docs, I can go gravatars, nodes, and then access display name, image URL, block number, etc. Let's now jump back to the code and we'll add in the second function as well. I'll copy in some existing code just to save a bit of time. But the main difference being that we need to first check if the gravatar already exists, and if it doesn't, we can then create it. Let's now run yarn dev and we'll do a quick test. And if I run this again, you'll see that it continues to work. So there you have it. A very quick example of how to go ahead and migrate a subgraph over to SubQuery.